Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how there has been much chatter about a combo Nintendo Direct next week. It looks like it's finally happening. The big Nintendo Direct we've all been waiting for all summer, it may finally be here. And so we're going to be talking about this chatter and what it may all mean today. But before going forward, let me simply ask that if you enjoy my videos, to subscribe. It would make me happy. But let's now get into this overall conversation. So, a lot of sources have come out talking about there being a Nintendo Direct in September. And historically speaking, at least throughout the entire Switch era, Nintendo Directs in September are the most common event of all different types of Nintendo Directs, except for last year. And then when we also take into account that throughout pretty much all of this year, Nintendo's been doing things in a very unorthodox way, very much outside of the pattern, it's been very hard to predict exactly how Nintendo's going to go about things because we can't really use prior precedent as that much of an indicator. That all said, there are plenty of rumors for a Direct in September, but all of these rumors are coming from credible places where they have been correct before. For example, the first people to talk about a Nintendo Direct specifically in September, friend of the channel Attack the Backlog, had actually put out a clip of a podcast he did with Nash Weedle, one of our favorite Nintendo leakers who's been consistently getting things right all throughout the year when it has to do with Nintendo Switch 2. Both of them did this podcast, and here in this clip, we've talked about this before, but this was posted on August 24th, and both of them are talking about how they heard about a Nintendo Direct happening in September. And Nash Weedle specifically stated that he heard about it happening in the second week of September. And so there you have two sources on a Direct happening the second week of September, and they are still hearing about there being a couple Directs in September, but there's some wiggle room there, which we'll be getting to. Then you have Switchforce, who also had some sourcing on the partner showcase, the Indie World, and had been hinting and teasing about another Direct, the next big wave, very soon. And here in this cryptic tweet he posted, he hinted at the Nintendo Direct happening on September 12th. And then, immediately afterwards, Video Games Chronicle cited Switchforce and talked about how they had also heard that there would be a Direct in the middle of the month. So by this point, already 4 sources that have a history of getting things right have come out and said that there would be a Nintendo Direct sometime in mid-September, the second week of September, and with Switchforce specifically on September 12th. This was all by August 25th. But it continues. A handful of days later, August 29th, Switchforce doubles down and says in 2 weeks, the Direct is still happening. No plans have changed, which I think is worth noting because we have talked about, we have heard, we have even seen confirmation of Nintendo Directs being pushed back and delayed or being changed around. But as of this point, according to Switchforce, still 2 weeks away as of August 29th. And then we have Nintendo, who also has a history of hearing about Nintendo Directs ahead of time and knowing when they're going to happen. And here he said, source, checked out about the rumored date for the next Nintendo Direct, and they are confirming September 12th as something they have heard. First reported by Switchforce. Asked about Animal Crossing for fun, lol, and they said Nintendo is being secretive about their stuff. So Nintendo is staying tight-lipped here. We don't have any leaks about any big major Nintendo reveals. However, it seems like people are consistently hearing that the Nintendo Direct is happening on September 12th, and we'll get to that date in a moment here, because we still have more chatter to get into here about this Nintendo Direct. Because just yesterday, perhaps the most known leaker of them all, Nate the Hate on Twitter said, yes, there is a Nintendo Direct in September. When? The second week of the month, in the latter half, on or around September 11th or 12th, essentially backing both Switchforce and Nintendo about this Nintendo Direct. So the original source on the September 12th date, Switchforce has a lot of backers, and the original source on there being a Direct in the second week, Nash Weedle, backed by several sources as well, even more so. And so there is a lot of corroboration here on there being a Nintendo Direct on September 12th, the second week of September, and I think this is an important date here. we've been talking about for a while that there's going to be a big Mario 40th anniversary celebration. Why do we think this? Well, yes, there are rumors, but it goes beyond rumors. We've been thinking about this for a while because it makes sense, because every 5 years Nintendo has a special big celebration for the Super Mario Bros. Series. There's usually, actually, the last several generations, there has been a anniversary release, and usually a lot more than just an anniversary release. Merchandising, events, presentations, for at least for the 35th anniversary last year. And so there's plenty of historical precedent to suggest that they're going to do something similar this time around as well, especially because, similar to prior anniversary years, we saw an increase in overall Mario merchandising and plans. We have seen some of that this year as well. There's more Mario merchandising. There's the My Mario line, which just came out. Charles Martinet has just recently confirmed that he'll be participating in Nintendo Live at the beginning of October. That's the original voice of Mario, for those who do not know. So there are signs that something is happening, and it seems very likely. And that brings me to this September 12th date. September 12th takes place one day before September 13th, which would be a Saturday, which is Mario's actual anniversary date. The anniversary for Super Mario Bros. That came out back in 1985 on September 13th. That Saturday would be 40 years later. And what's interesting about this is that if we account for time zones, if it's late enough into the day, it could be taking place on the actual 13th, say for example, in Japan. So it would actually be a direct happening on Mario's anniversary. Now, I don't think it actually has to happen on Mario's anniversary, but this might be why they are doing it so late into the week, because normally they do not do this so late into the week. But pushing it towards the end of the week to align with Mario's actual 40th anniversary date, it makes sense, and obviously would tip us off to the idea that this direct will have a lot to do with Mario's 40th anniversary. And it makes sense for us to hear about a Mario anniversary game to actually come out in the month of September, very similar to how it happened back in 2020. They had a Mario anniversary direct on September 3rd, and then on September 18th it came out, Super Mario 3D All-Stars. We could be looking at a very fast turnaround here, perhaps even a shadow drop with a physical release coming out a little bit later by the end of the month. Nintendo likes to have published titles come out in September. They've had a published title come out in September every year throughout the entire Switch era, and August is kind of slow, and this is the launch year Switch too, so you would think they would want to come out with something strong in September. It makes even more sense when we consider this. But something I want to throw out there is that we've been down this road before, where we have a lot of sources telling us there will be a Nintendo Direct, and we get very excited, but the Nintendo Direct is a Nintendo Direct, and it does happen when it happens, and all the sources were correct. However, sometimes we think it's the biggest, best Nintendo Direct ever, and it's something more smaller scale, like a partner showcase, which can still be good, but is not what everyone's waiting for. Last time I thought for sure there was no way it would be a partner showcase because we had a need to get information on a variety of Nintendo games coming out throughout this year and more, and it was just a partner showcase. What has happened is that Nintendo has opted to not talk about most of these things and really have us scrambling and worrying here, and I do have some thoughts on that. I'm actually saving that for another video for another day. I'm trying to take a deeper look into Nintendo's overall marketing strategy because I do think there's something special going on with Metroid Prime 4, which again, we'll get to another day. But anyways, the point is, we thought they had to do something significant back in July when we heard about this direct that was corroborated by many sources that were all correct, but it wasn't what we thought. So, could this happen again? And my answer to that is absolutely yes. Now, I'm going to say that the odds of this being just another partner showcase are pretty low. It most likely will be a direct that's very first party related, especially if it's being timed around Mario's 40th anniversary. Why else would they be doing that? But maybe it's not the general Nintendo Direct we've all been waiting for. Maybe it is just a Mario Bros. Anniversary Direct, which would be awesome. I would love for there to be another Mario Anniversary Direct, but Mario stuff would just be Mario stuff. They would talk about the park, the movies, merchandising, events, and presumably an anniversary release, which I think might be a remaster of Mario Galaxy 2. That would be fantastic. But that wouldn't give us a release date or more information on Metroid Prime 4 or Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment or a release date for Elden Ring or Final Fantasy VII Remake or other third-party offerings or any sort of new announcements from Nintendo about what's to come down the road. It wouldn't be any of that. And we have heard from both Nash Weedle and Attack the Backlog that there could be a couple Nintendo Directs in September, as in more than one. So maybe this is just a Mario Anniversary Direct and there's a general Direct happening maybe a week or two later, or this is a combo Nintendo Direct where we are getting both together. There's going to be the Mario Anniversary stuff as its own dedicated segment during this big major Direct, or there's going to be Mario Anniversary stuff happening beforehand and then we get this general on September 12th as we're hearing. Now, I think that last one is the least likely option because why would they be waiting for this Direct to happen on September 12th right before Mario's anniversary? It's a weird time to have a Nintendo Direct. Of course, it's also possible that the timing may simply be off here from what we're hearing. Maybe both Nintendo Talk and Switchverse are hearing about the date for Japan, and so it would be September 12th there, a day before September 13th, but here in the West it would still be September 11th. And then at that point this Direct is not actually on Mario's anniversary and a little bit beforehand. So there is that possibility. Maybe it's not actually being delayed. Maybe they're not actually pushing the Direct too far into the weekend. It's actually on a Thursday, which we have seen Directs happen on Thursdays before, and it's just a normal general Direct. That is something else to consider here. So ultimately, the point I want to get at here is to keep our minds open on what may happen. And I think once September is all said and done, we're going to have all the information we need for the rest of the year and some exciting things to think about going to 2026 as well, because that's typically how it happens. Once the September Direct has come and gone, by that point of the year, we know about the entire holiday lineup in full, and we also know about some nice interesting nuggets going into the next year. So Nintendo may handle things a bit out of the ordinary, they may have some special unique plans, but once it's all said and done, we're going to have the information we're expecting to get. But I would like to go back to something Nintendo Talk said from what he heard from his source. Nintendo is being secretive about their stuff, so obviously we don't know what that would entail necessarily, right? Like, we don't know what they're being secretive about, but surely they have some surprise announcements, which is exciting to think about. And when we also consider that it has been a while since we've gotten a general Direct, the last one was back in April, there should be a lot of material here for it to be a pretty fun, exciting presentation. We have the Mario Anniversary stuff, we have information about Metroid Prime 4 to look forward to, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, more on Kirby Air Riders, maybe another mention of Pokemon Legends ZA, information on a lot of third parties that we're expecting release dates for, like Elden Ring, Final Fantasy, but we'll probably also start to hear about new things as well, like maybe the next wave of Nintendo Switch 2 editions. What might that be? And also probably the next waves of partner showcase highlights as well. Will we get an update on the Dustbloods? I'm hoping so. That's probably going to be one of the biggest releases for Switch 2 next year. And could there be other big exclusives like that? I think the answer is also yes. So I'm expecting some interesting surprises throughout this presentation. And then just thinking about new first-party titles Nintendo could announce, I wouldn't be surprised if we see one or two announced during this presentation. There are some projects we have heard about, such as Project SP Red, which presumably would be the next 3D Mario. Maybe they do decide to tease that as part of celebrating Mario's 40th anniversary. Finally seeing 3D Mario, the actual 3D Mario game for Switch 2, would be pretty special. I do think it's about time Nintendo shows us what the Switch 2 can really do. I don't really feel like we've seen the full extent of what Switch 2 is capable of, and of course I understand that as the generation progresses, developers will have more time to get acclimated to the hardware, there will be different updates and things of that nature, so we'll start to see more of the console. But I still feel like when we take a look at things like Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, while they're certainly impressive compared to Switch 1 standards, I feel like the Switch 2 should be able to do something more, something even more impressive. So I'm waiting to see something from maybe a 3D Mario that perhaps started development with Switch 2 in mind from the very beginning, unlike Mario Kart World and unlike Donkey Kong Bonanza, and also unlike Metroid Prime 4, which does look good but started off development as only a Switch 1 title. So I'm curious if we'll start to see some games that were developed with Switch 2 in mind from the very beginning. Another that comes to mind is Project Legacy. Are we finally going to see confirmation of what Monolith Soft has been cooking. What might that be? The next Xenoblade, or perhaps something totally new? I think something totally new, a big brand new IP that might be something super open and vast and ambitious, which would be very exciting. I would love to see what Monolith Soft can do with vastly more powerful hardware than the Switch 1. And those are just some possibilities. There's plenty more. So my hype and anticipation for this Nintendo Direct, whatever form it may come in, be it split into parts or one giant presentation, is building. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.